Maya huddled under her thin blanket, shivering as the cold wind swept through the narrow alley. The city never really slept, but the night brought its own kind of loneliness. She had learned to be quiet, to move carefully, and to watch without being seen. Life on the streets was not easy, but Maya had learned to survive with a small backpack of her belongings, a few cans of food, and her own clever mind. Tonight, however, something unusual disturbed the normal rhythm of the city. Amid the distant car horns and occasional laughter from late-night pedestrians, Maya heard a sound that made her stop. It was faint at first, but then it grew clearer, a human voice, crying out in desperation. She stood up, pulling her worn jacket tighter around her thin frame. The sound seemed to come from above, from one of the tall glass buildings nearby. She had never ventured inside one of those towers, but the voice was urgent, pleading. Maya felt a strange pull in her chest. Compassion, curiosity, or maybe both, she didn't know. She moved closer, ducking behind corners and trash bins to avoid being noticed. Her eyes scanned the high-rise buildings until she found the source, a penthouse window on the top floor, lights flickering. Someone inside was calling for help. Maya's heart raced. Who could be in trouble at this hour? And why had no one else heard the cries? With a sudden resolve, she decided to climb. Not through the door, she had no access, but by a service ladder hidden in the shadows near the building. It was risky, but Maya had faced worse situations before. One step at a time, she climbed, her fingers gripping the cold metal tightly. The wind tugged at her hair, and her stomach twisted, but she kept moving upward. Finally, she reached a small ledge just below the open window. Peering inside, Maya saw a man, tall, dressed in expensive clothes, but clearly panicked. He was surrounded by screens and machines, all blinking red warning signs. Something in the room seemed broken, and the man didn't know how to fix it. "Please, someone help me," the man shouted, running his hands through his hair. His voice was strained, filled with fear. Maya hesitated for only a moment. Then she called out softly, "I can help." The man froze. He turned toward the sound, his eyes wide with disbelief. He clearly had not expected anyone to hear him, let alone offer assistance. Who are you?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I'm Maya," she said, keeping her voice calm. I can fix it." The man stared at her. She was a young girl, wearing old clothes patched with tape, with dirt smudged across her face and hands. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. Finally, he said, You can't, you don't understand what this is." Maya shook her head slightly. "I may not have your machines, or your money, but I know how to solve problems. Let me try." There was a long silence. The man's name was Daniel. He was used to people telling him what to do, to assistants and engineers obeying his every command. But this girl had nothing, and yet she was confident. Something about her made him pause. "All right, fine," Daniel said, almost reluctantly. "But if this goes wrong," he trailed off, unsure how to finish. Maya nodded and stepped carefully into the penthouse, her eyes scanning the room. Machines beeped and flashed, warning of failures that could cause chaos if ignored. But Maya's mind worked quickly. She didn't need to understand every device, she needed to understand the problem. "Tell me what happened," she said. "Step by step." Daniel hesitated, then explained how a critical system in his company had malfunctioned. The error could cause a financial disaster if not fixed immediately. He admitted, almost ashamedly, that he had tried everything he knew and had failed. Maya listened carefully, nodding. Then she began to move around, touching wires, pressing buttons, and checking connections. Her hands were small and nimble, but her focus was sharp. Daniel watched, astonished, as she worked calmly and carefully. Minutes passed. The tension in the room eased slightly. Daniel's panic didn't vanish, but he felt something he hadn't in a long time: hope. Finally, Maya stepped back. "It's fixed," she said simply. "It should work now." Daniel stared at her, speechless. The machine stopped beeping. The red lights turned green. A wave of relief washed over him. He had never expected this from a homeless girl on the streets. Maya smiled faintly. "Sometimes," she said, "you just need someone who can see the problem clearly." Daniel didn't know what to say. He had faced boardrooms, crises, and emergencies before, but never had he encountered someone like Maya, someone without privilege, without fear, and with the courage to act when it mattered most. And in that moment, the first connection between two very different worlds was formed. Daniel sat back in his leather chair, staring at the blinking green lights on his screens. For the first time in years, he felt a mix of relief and disbelief. The crisis that had been consuming him for days was over. All because of a young homeless girl who had walked into his life like a quiet storm. Maya, still standing near the doorway, wiped her hands on her jacket. She wasn't used to rooms like this, rooms filled with machines, screens, and blinking lights, but she had learned to focus on what mattered: the problem. And she had fixed it. "Thank you," Daniel said finally, his voice calmer now, though still tinged with wonder. I don't know how to thank you." Maya shrugged. "You don't need to thank me. I just did what I could." She glanced around the penthouse. "But, what happens if something else goes wrong? You seem like you're dealing with a lot here." Daniel looked at her, surprised by her honesty. Most people in his world either fawned over him or avoided him. No one had ever spoken to him like that. I suppose I handle it," he said slowly, realizing how hollow that sounded. "I've been managing this company, these systems, everything, but sometimes I feel like I'm losing control." Maya tilted her head. "Maybe that's why you called for help, even if you didn't know it. People often wait too long to ask for help, thinking they have to do everything themselves." Daniel's brow furrowed. She made it sound so simple, yet it wasn't. He was a billionaire, used to having money solve problems. But here was a girl with no money, no assistance, no tools, and she had fixed a problem he couldn't. Somehow, she had more power than he did, not the kind that comes from money, but the kind that comes from courage and intelligence. "You're different," Daniel said. "I've never met anyone like you." Maya smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe you've just never noticed people who are different from your world." Daniel leaned back, studying her. There was something about her eyes, a mix of strength, curiosity, and kindness, that made him uncomfortable but also intrigued. He had spent years building walls around himself, and yet this girl seemed to walk through them without hesitation. "I suppose," he began slowly, "I should ask your name." "Maya," she said simply. "Maya," he repeated, letting the name linger. "I'm Daniel." "Nice to meet you, Daniel." Maya's voice was calm, almost steady, but there was a hint of caution. She didn't usually trust people quickly. Life on the streets had taught her to be careful. Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. "I've been so focused on money, control, and success. I forgot what it means to actually live. To feel connected. And then you show up, and suddenly everything I thought mattered seems smaller." Maya blinked, unsure how to respond. She wasn't used to people being honest like this. Most adults avoided talking about their feelings or looked at her with pity. But Daniel, he was being genuine, raw even. "You can't fix everything," she said gently. "Sometimes, you just need someone to remind you what's really important. That's all I did tonight. I reminded you." Daniel leaned forward, intrigued. "And you've survived on the streets? How do you do it?" Maya shrugged. "One day at a time. I watch, I listen, I figure out what works. People think surviving is about strength, but really, it's about noticing details and staying calm. That's how I fix things. Daniel studied her. You're remarkable. Maya felt a small blush rise to her cheeks. People didn't often call her remarkable. They usually looked past her, or worse, looked down on her. But Daniel wasn't looking down. He was seeing her. Truly seeing her. There was a pause, and then Daniel said softly, almost to himself, I could learn from you. Maya's eyes widened. She hadn't expected that. Most people from his world wouldn't dare admit they had something to learn from someone like her. You could, she said slowly. But only if you're willing to listen. And if you're ready to see the world differently, not just through money and power. Daniel nodded, considering her words. He realized that tonight wasn't just about fixing a machine or preventing a disaster. It was about realizing he needed more than money and status to live fully. Maybe someone like Maya could teach him what he had been missing. For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt a spark of hope, not hope for his company, not hope for success, but hope for himself. And he knew, somehow, that Maya's presence in his life was the beginning of something unexpected, something he couldn't have planned or bought. Maya glanced toward the door, ready to leave. I should go, she said. It's late, and the streets aren't kind at night. Daniel stood, stopping her. No, stay. Please. I want to learn from you. I want to understand. Maya hesitated, then nodded. She didn't know what this connection would lead to, but something told her it was worth exploring. That night, in a luxurious penthouse overlooking the city, a billionaire and a homeless girl began a journey together. A journey that neither of them expected, but one that would change both of their lives forever. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Daniel's penthouse. Maya sat on the edge of a couch, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She had spent the night on a spare blanket he had offered, though she preferred the streets. Still, the warmth of the room was a small comfort she did not mind. Daniel paced the room, deep in thought. He was used to commanding attention, giving orders, and solving problems with money or authority. But Maya had shown him something different. She had solved a problem he could not. And more than that, she had reminded him of something he had long forgotten: patience, observation, and calm. I still can't believe it, Daniel said finally, breaking the silence. Last night, you fixed it? Just like that? Maya shrugged. It wasn't magic. It was observation and patience. Anyone can learn if they take the time to notice details instead of rushing. Daniel frowned. I'm not sure I understand. Maya leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. Think about it. You spent days worrying, panicking, and trying to force the solution. I looked, I listened, and I stayed calm. That's the difference. Sometimes, trying too hard makes the problem worse. Daniel ran his hand through his hair, clearly frustrated and intrigued at the same time. So, what you're saying is, I need to slow down. Maya nodded. Exactly. And maybe stop thinking that everything can be fixed with money or status. Some things require patience, thought, and heart. Daniel took a deep breath. I don't know if I've ever really done that before. Maya smiled gently. It's never too late to start. You just need to be willing to try. For a moment, they sat in silence, both thinking. Daniel stared at the screens that now blinked green, feeling a strange sense of calm. He realized that last night had been more than just solving a technical problem. He had experienced something he hadn't felt in years: trust. Can I ask you something? Daniel said finally. Of course. How did you survive, out there? On the streets? Maya's face softened. She had learned not to share too much with strangers, but Daniel was different. He had listened without judgment. It wasn't easy, she said quietly. Every day is a choice. You have to figure out how to keep going, how to find food, how to stay safe. And you have to learn who to trust. But you also learn a lot about people, about yourself, and about what really matters. Daniel nodded slowly. He had always lived in a world of luxury and rules, but he had never had to survive like that. And somehow, Maya had strength he could never buy. You're teaching me already, Daniel said with a small smile. Not about machines or business, but about life. And I think I need that. Maya's smile widened. Good. Then listen carefully. Life isn't about control or fear. It's about learning, noticing, and caring. And yes, sometimes fixing things isn't about using tools, it's about using your mind and your heart together. Daniel looked at her, amazed. I never thought of it that way. They spent the morning walking through the penthouse together. Daniel showed Maya his office, the rows of machines and screens, and explained his business a little, not the details of money or profits, but the problems that weighed on him. Maya listened, offering small insights, asking questions, and pointing out solutions he hadn't considered. What you don't realize, she said gently, is that you rely too much on what you think is right, instead of actually observing the problem. Daniel paused. So, I should pay more attention. Exactly, Maya said. Listen, notice, think. And don't forget to care. Even small actions can make a big difference. By noon, Daniel felt lighter than he had in months. The panic and fear that had gripped him for days were replaced by clarity and calm. Maya's lessons were simple, but powerful. He realized he had been blind to the obvious, thinking that only money and power could solve problems. Maya glanced out the window at the bustling city below. You see all those people, she said. Everyone has problems, just like yours. Some big, some small. But the world keeps moving, and we keep learning. That's life. That's what you need to remember. Daniel nodded, taking it all in. For the first time, he felt that he could face his challenges without panic, without fear, and without relying solely on money. Maya had taught him a lesson that no boardroom or luxury could provide. And as they stood together, watching the city, Daniel realized that their worlds were very different, but maybe, just maybe, they could learn from each other. Maya had fixed the machine, yes. But more importantly, she had begun to fix something inside Daniel. Days passed, but Daniel couldn't stop thinking about Maya. Her words lingered in his mind, echoing louder than any boardroom advice he had ever received. He realized that life was more than money, machines, or control. It was about understanding, noticing, and caring. And Maya had shown him that in the simplest, clearest way. One morning, he found her sitting on the penthouse balcony, her legs dangling over the edge, looking down at the busy streets below. She had a small notebook in her lap, sketching little ideas or notes, he wasn't sure which. You're early, she said without looking up. I wanted to see you, Daniel replied. I realized I have a lot to learn from you. Maya glanced at him, one eyebrow raised. A lot. Yes, Daniel said. Not just about fixing machines or solving problems, but about life. How to see clearly, how to act wisely, how to care. You see the world differently than I do. Maya finally smiled, a quiet, understanding smile. And that's okay. Different worlds can meet if people are willing to listen. Daniel nodded, feeling the weight of her words. It wasn't easy for him to admit that someone from a completely different life could teach him so much. But that was exactly what made it real. Show me today, he said. Show me how you see things. Maya closed her notebook and pointed toward the street below. Look at the people, she said. Some are rushing, some are tired, some are happy. Everyone has a story. If you only look at numbers or reports, you miss it all. Life is about noticing details and understanding them. Daniel leaned over the balcony, watching the crowd. For the first time, he noticed the small things: the old man helping a child across the street, a street vendor smiling at a customer, a woman stopping to tie her shoe and glance at the sky. All these moments had passed him by before, lost in his rush for success. You're right, he said softly. I've never seen it like this. Maya's eyes sparkled. Good. Seeing is the first step. The second step is understanding. Don't judge. Don't assume. Just notice. Then, when it's time to act, do it with care. Daniel took a deep breath. He realized that he had been blind in many ways. He had judged quickly, assumed outcomes, and relied too much on his wealth and authority. Maya's way of thinking was simple, but powerful. Later, they moved inside, where Daniel showed her a small project he had been struggling with, an initiative meant to help people in need. But it had stalled. He had tried directing his employees, spending money, and creating strategies, but nothing worked. Show me, Maya said simply. Daniel hesitated. I don't know if this is something you can fix. Maya shook her head. I don't know either. But we can try. Together. They spent hours talking, brainstorming, and observing the project. Maya asked questions that Daniel had never considered. She pointed out problems he had overlooked and offered solutions that didn't require more money, just understanding, patience, and clear thinking. By the end of the day, the project was moving forward again. Daniel felt a sense of accomplishment he hadn't felt in a long time, not because of money or success, but because he had learned to see clearly and act wisely. You've changed the way I think, Daniel admitted. I thought I knew everything, but I was wrong. Maya shrugged lightly. You just needed someone to remind you. And now you're starting to notice things for yourself. That's the important part. As evening fell, they sat on the balcony again, watching the city lights flicker on. The gap between their worlds felt smaller now. Daniel realized that wealth and status didn't define him, and survival and resilience didn't define Maya. What mattered was the understanding they shared and the lessons they were learning from each other. You know, Daniel said quietly, I think we make a good team. Maya laughed softly. Maybe. But don't forget, I'm just teaching. You have to learn for yourself. Daniel smiled. I know. But somehow, learning with you feels different. Better. For the first time in years, Daniel felt connected, not to money, not to power, not to machines, but to another person. Someone who could see the world in a way he never had. Someone who reminded him that life was not about control, but about understanding and care. Maya looked at him, seeing the change in his eyes. She knew that this was just the beginning. They had bridged two worlds, two very different lives, but they were learning from each other. And for the first time, Daniel didn't feel alone. That night, as the city below buzzed with life, both of them understood something important. True growth came not from what they had, but from what they could learn and teach together. The next morning, Maya sat quietly in the penthouse kitchen, sipping a cup of tea Daniel had prepared. The sunlight poured in through the large windows, but her mind wasn't on the view. She was thinking about the streets, about the nights she had spent alone, and about the people she had lost along the way. For a moment, the weight of her past pressed heavily on her shoulders. Daniel noticed her silence. He had learned to read her expressions, small details that told him more than words. You're quiet today, he said gently. Is something bothering you? Maya hesitated. She wasn't used to opening up. People often judged her, dismissed her, or pitied her. But Daniel, he had never treated her that way. He had listened, respected her thoughts, and valued her advice. Slowly, she decided to speak. "My life hasn't been easy," she said quietly. "I lost my parents when I was very young. I had to learn to survive on the streets. People hurt me, ignored me, sometimes took advantage of me. I've faced hunger, cold, and fear every day. And yet," she paused, looking at Daniel, "I've learned to keep going. To trust carefully. And to notice the small things that make life better." Daniel listened intently, his expression softening. "I can't imagine what that must have been like," he said. "But I can see why you're strong. And why you see things the way you do." Maya nodded. "It made me who I am. But it makes it hard to trust people. That's why I watch first, listen first, before I act. I can't afford to make mistakes with trust." Daniel leaned forward. "I understand. And I promise. I'm not here to hurt you or take advantage. I want to learn from you. I want to understand." For the first time in a long while, Maya felt a small sense of relief. She had shared a part of her story, and Daniel hadn't judged or rejected her. He had simply listened. "I'll tell you something else," she continued, her voice steadier now. "Even with everything I've faced, I've learned that kindness matters. That even small actions can make a difference. And that no matter how hard life gets, you can always find a way to fix things, sometimes yourself, sometimes someone else." Daniel nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "I think I've been missing that. I've spent so much time focused on money, status, and control that I forgot about people, about kindness, about the small things." Maya looked at him, a faint smile forming. "Then you're ready to learn. That's what matters." Later that day, Daniel invited Maya to join him in the office, where he managed some of his charitable projects. One of the projects had stalled because it focused too much on numbers and reports, rather than understanding the needs of the people it was supposed to help. Maya observed quietly at first, then offered suggestions. "Try listening to them," she said. "Not just once, but really listening. Notice what they need, what they struggle with, what they hope for. Then you'll see how to help." Daniel followed her advice. He went to the people, asked questions, and listened without judgment. Slowly, the project began moving again. He saw the impact of understanding and care, not just resources and authority. By evening, they returned to the penthouse, both tired but satisfied. Daniel looked at Maya, a mix of admiration and gratitude in his eyes. "You've changed the way I see things," he said. "I thought I was helping people before, but now I see I was missing so much. You've taught me more than I ever imagined." Maya smiled softly. "And you've taught me something too," she said. "You've reminded me that even someone with everything can feel lost. And that we all need guidance, understanding, and support." For a moment, they sat in silence, both reflecting on the day. Then Maya said quietly, "I never thought I'd be here, teaching a billionaire life lessons. But I guess, life is full of surprises." Daniel chuckled softly. "It is. And I'm glad it brought me to you." Maya felt a warmth in her chest, a small spark of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. Despite her struggles, despite the hardships of her past, she realized that connections like this could change everything. People could surprise you. Life could surprise you. That night, as the city below buzzed with lights and movement, both Daniel and Maya reflected on their journeys. Their pasts were very different, one filled with wealth but loneliness, the other with hardship but resilience, but they had found a bridge between their worlds. Maya understood now that facing the past didn't mean being trapped by it. And Daniel realized that even the richest life could feel empty without understanding, kindness, and trust. Together, they were learning, growing, and slowly transforming not just their situations, but themselves. And in that moment, both of them knew that the path ahead, no matter how uncertain, would be brighter because they had found someone to walk it with. Weeks had passed since Maya first entered Daniel's penthouse. Their bond had grown stronger, built on trust, understanding, and shared experiences. Daniel had begun applying the lessons Maya had taught him not just in his work, but in his life. He noticed the people around him more, listened more carefully, and approached problems with patience instead of panic. One morning, Daniel invited Maya to a meeting with his team. Normally, he would have dominated the discussion, giving orders and expecting immediate results. But today was different. "Everyone," Daniel said, glancing at Maya, "I want you to listen carefully. And I want you to notice the details. Maya has helped me see things differently, and I hope you can too." The team looked confused, but Maya smiled gently and nodded. "Sometimes solutions don't come from money, rules, or power," she said. "They come from observation, patience, and understanding. Look carefully, listen, and think before acting. You'd be surprised what you can learn." Daniel watched in awe as his employees started engaging differently, asking questions, discussing ideas openly, and thinking critically. Maya's influence was subtle, but powerful. She didn't need authority, her insight and confidence inspired action. After the meeting, Daniel turned to Maya. "You've changed the way I work, the way I think, and the way I see people. I didn't know that could happen so fast." Maya shrugged lightly. "You were willing to listen. That's what makes the difference. Lessons only work when someone is ready to learn." Later that day, they walked together through the city. Daniel noticed things he had missed before: the laughter of children playing in the park, a street musician strumming a guitar, people helping each other without expecting anything in return. Maya's lessons had opened his eyes to the small moments that made life meaningful. "You see," Maya said, smiling. "Life is full of small miracles if you pay attention. You don't need money or power to notice them. Just your heart and your mind." Daniel nodded. "I never thought I'd feel this way. I used to believe wealth solved everything. Now I see it's only part of life. What really matters is understanding, caring, and acting with purpose." Maya's eyes softened. "Exactly. And the more you practice, the easier it becomes." That evening, back in the penthouse, Daniel showed Maya a new plan he had created for his company. Instead of focusing solely on profits, it prioritized helping people in meaningful ways. He had used her advice about observation, patience, and empathy to redesign the project. "I want to make a difference, not just earn money," Daniel said quietly. "You've taught me that." Maya looked at him with a small, proud smile. "And you're doing it. That's what matters, taking what you learn and applying it." They spent hours discussing new ideas, brainstorming ways to help more people, and planning small changes that could have a big impact. Maya realized that Daniel wasn't just learning, he was transforming. And she felt a sense of satisfaction she hadn't expected. Helping someone grow, seeing them change, was a reward in itself. Weeks turned into months. Daniel's transformation became evident not only in his work but in his demeanor. He was calmer, kinder, and more present. People noticed the change, but Daniel knew the real credit belonged to Maya. She had shown him what money could not buy: insight, patience, and a genuine understanding of life. Maya's own life was changing too. Living with Daniel, seeing his world, and sharing her perspective had opened new possibilities. She had always been a survivor, but now she dreamed of more. Education, opportunities, a better future, things she hadn't thought possible before. And she realized that helping Daniel had also helped her see what she could achieve. One evening, as they watched the city lights flicker below the penthouse, Daniel turned to Maya. "I don't know how to thank you for everything. You've changed my life." Maya shook her head. You don't need to thank me. Just keep learning, keep noticing, and keep caring. That's enough. Daniel smiled, feeling a warmth in his heart. You've done more than that. You've reminded me what it means to be human. That's something I couldn't have learned anywhere else. Maya felt a soft blush rise to her cheeks. She didn't often hear such words, and it touched her in a way she hadn't expected. Then I guess, we've helped each other, she said quietly. Daniel nodded. Yes. We have. And in that moment, both of them understood the truth of their journey. Transformation wasn't just about fixing problems or solving crises. It was about growth, understanding, and the courage to see life differently. Maya had fixed more than machines, she had helped fix a lonely billionaire's heart. And Daniel had helped Maya realize that her future could be brighter than she ever imagined. Together, they had changed not just each other, but the world around them, one thoughtful, patient step at a time. The city below glowed with lights as night settled over the streets. Daniel stood at the balcony of his penthouse, watching the people move through their lives. He felt a sense of calm he hadn't known in years. Beside him, Maya leaned against the railing, her notebook in hand, quietly observing. Do you ever get tired of looking at the city like this? Daniel asked, glancing at her. Maya shook her head. Never. There's always something new to notice, something to learn. Every person has a story, every street a secret. It's like life itself, you just have to pay attention. Daniel smiled. He realized how much he had learned from her, not just about life, but about himself. The panic, the fear, the loneliness that had haunted him for years, it was fading. Maya had shown him a new way to live, one that didn't depend on money or power, but on understanding, patience, and care. You know, Daniel said softly, I used to think I had everything. Wealth, status, control. But I was missing the most important things. Connection, understanding, and courage. You taught me that, Maya. You really did. Maya looked at him, her eyes reflecting the city lights. We've taught each other, she said. You taught me that even someone with everything can feel lost. And I've learned that I can dream bigger, believe in myself, and make a difference. Not just survive, but live. Daniel nodded, feeling the truth of her words. They had both changed. Their worlds had been so different, yet together they had built something rare, a bond based on trust, respect, and shared learning. Are you ready for the next step? Daniel asked, his voice gentle but firm. Maya tilted her head. What do you mean? I mean, life is bigger than survival or business. There are opportunities, challenges, and choices ahead. We can make a difference not just for ourselves, but for others too. Are you ready to take that journey with me? Maya thought for a moment. She had been careful all her life, always watching, always protecting herself. But Daniel's sincerity, his respect, and the lessons they had shared made her believe in the possibility of a brighter future. Yes, she said finally. I'm ready. The next weeks were filled with learning, planning, and action. Daniel applied the lessons Maya had taught him to his company, his life, and his charitable projects. He noticed the people around him, listened to their concerns, and acted with care instead of control. Slowly, his business began to reflect his new perspective, success measured not only in money, but in impact and understanding. Maya, too, found new confidence. She continued to teach Daniel, but she also began pursuing her own dreams. She enrolled in courses, connected with people who could help her grow, and even started helping others in her old neighborhood. Life on the streets was no longer her only option. With courage, patience, and determination, she began building a future she had never imagined. One evening, as they stood together on the balcony, Daniel spoke again. Maya, you've changed my life. You've taught me what money could never buy. I can't imagine going back to the way I was. Maya smiled softly. And you've helped me see what I can become. Together, we've shown each other that the impossible is possible. Daniel looked at her, a seriousness in his eyes. I want you to know. I trust you. Not just because you're smart, but because you see the world honestly and care deeply. That's rare. That's priceless. Maya felt a warmth she had not felt in years. It wasn't about wealth or status, it was about respect, understanding, and connection. She realized that this partnership, this bond, was something that could last a lifetime. Thank you, Daniel, she said quietly. For believing in me, for listening, and for learning. Most people never do. Daniel reached out and gently placed his hand on hers. No. We did this together. And now, we can face whatever comes next. Side by side. Maya nodded. Side by side, she repeated, feeling a sense of hope and strength she had never known before. As the city lights shimmered below, both of them understood the truth. Life was full of challenges, pasts that could hurt, and moments of doubt. But it was also full of opportunity, growth, and connection. They had learned from each other, transformed together, and now had the courage to embrace the future. For Daniel, wealth and power no longer defined his life. For Maya, survival had grown into hope and possibility. Together, they had bridged two worlds, taught each other what money could never buy, and discovered the value of understanding, care, and courage. And as the night settled over the city, a new beginning unfolded, one filled with hope, purpose, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow.